even though religious people tend to not like that, but they don't understand that it's the best thing for them. So Christians in America, who are the vast majority, they want the government to be more involved in religion. And what non-religious people are always trying to get them to understand is that the freedom, that separation is for them. Because if they ever find themselves in a place where they're in the minority, they're going to be really glad that the government is not able to dictate to them what sort of religion they should follow.
Like, this is something that comes up in Speaker's Corner quite a lot. Like, this is I know a lot of Muslims feel that Britain is too permissive with the way it allows people to insult Islam. I've heard this argument many times, and I think it's really interesting because if we had more restrictive... Actually, Muslims are some of the prime victims of our restrictive hate laws, because we have, so not hate laws, there are lots of Muslims who fall foul of our existing laws on curtailing freedom of speech, and B, if we had worse, I'm pretty sure they would be aimed at Islam. They would be aimed at Islamic societies and universities, they would be aimed at Islamic societies in schools and other areas. So it's kind of unusual for me that I meet so many Muslims who are arguing for a rule and a mindset that would ultimately be about suppressing Islam and suppressing the freedom of speech of Muslims. I don't get it.
It's true. I think the point is that I think the key argument of Amir is that is there a society that is a model society where
Norway.
there is absolute expression of freedom of speech?
Norway.
Does it really exist?
I think you were asking where to draw the line. I think the key is you draw,
issue is that is it arbitrary or is it objective?
It's not arbitrary. You draw.
Nice to have a discussion. Is it arbitrary?
It's not
or is it objective?
It's not. It's not. It's. I mean, it's slightly arbitrary, but it's arbitrary in the way that we all have to come up with. We all have to come up with what those throttle points are. So what you do is you draw. You lean to the side of maximum freedom up to the point where you now have to start to make restrictions that will prevent real harm from people. So in a place like Speaker's Corner, it's very liberal, right? We can say almost anything, pretty much anything.
But you can't run society like that.
Right. So in a school, that line has to be much more restricted because they have a specific goal. They need to have kids and seats learning. They can't just have it can't be Speaker's Corner every day in math class, right? It has to be organized because they have a specific goal. At work, you can't stand up on a ladder and start preaching, right?
But doesn't that prove to you that freedom of speech in its actual form in your life doesn't actually exist? And it can't exist, and it's not practical.
It varies depending on where you are at the moment. But I think when you are in a place where the only governing body is the actual government, and not your boss or your school or whatever, or your home with your parents, you have that maximum amount of freedom. So on the internet, in public, in a place like Speaker's Corner, when you're talking to people,
but
that's where you come closest to the maximum freedom.
I think one of the
if somebody were to insult something that you hold dear, you are more than entitled to either respond with better ideas or respond with vile if that's what you feel like doing, or ignore them altogether.
But that's not how we actually get good characteristics in a society. So, for example, if you have a civilization,
but if
you have a civilization where it's all about, okay, I have the right to insult you, but then you, as part of intellectual debate, insult me. That doesn't lead to prosperity of society. That will actually lead to some of the, some of the bad propaganda that we see in the media at the current moment.
Yep.
So my issue is that actually, okay, so even though that's a good idea, fair enough, my issue is that how do we get to the peak of civilization? Because we don't get to the peak of civilization exactly. But my point is that red line on freedom at the current moment is arbitrary. So people are like people.
But you can't force people to collaborate in a constructive way, but you can allow people to reveal their true self. So if I have a neighbor who is constantly saying truly unhelpful, hateful things, and they have lost all credibility in my mind, I can factor them out of my collaboration project, right? And I can over time only really start to collaborate with the people that I can be constructive.
But what if they start affecting your personal life?
Well, if they steal from me or if they harm me, then I can call the police because that's not speech anymore.
I know, but what I'm saying is that what you see is that, say for example, someone continuously threatens you. So we're talking about speech.
So
someone threatens you,
right?
Yeah? So this is my point. It's still arbitrary. So the issue is that. Say
so
for
I mentioned
example,
the fire in a crowded cinema thing. It's possible that we have to draw the line on certain types of threats that are clearly actionable.
So what is the red line? my question to you
I'm
is
sure there's
because
something
I
wrong.
don't,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
believe, the ultimate free speech can exist.
Well, it's different in different places too. By the way, there's laws against slander in the UK, right? People get
You can't go- you can't say
but those they don't
everyone
exist in the
one
US.
family.
They don't exist in the US.
But
So
I'm
you
pretty
can
sure-
say whatever you want about the president. You can say whatever you want about anybody. You cannot threaten the president.
I know, but it's even about Hillary.
Even about Hillary, you can say whatever you want about her. You
But
can't threaten to
say
kill
for
her.
example, someone came out, and I'm not encouraging this, but say for example, someone comes out and they say something about the Holocaust. I'm pretty sure there will be a massive backlash against that statement.
Yes, but they shouldn't go to prison now. In Germany, that's illegal, and I think that it's very foolish. But in the UK, in America, you can be a Holocaust denier, and you know what? If somebody is a Holocaust denier, or something else incredibly unhelpful like that, I would rather know. I'd rather know it. There was a big debate. There was a flag that was part of the Confederate States, the south of the U.S. that had slaves and fought the Civil War for slavery. A few years ago, there was a big controversy about whether or not government buildings should be flying that flag anymore, which they still were. Of course, they should not, because that was a rebel government that was anti-U.S. and those flags need to be taken down. It's ridiculous. And people who were opposed to taking those flags down said, next you're going to come and tell me I can't fly that flag in front of my house. And everybody said, no, we're not going to tell you that. That's your right. That's your speech. You want to fly that pro-slavery flag in front of your house? That's great. And in fact, if you're the kind of person who wants to fly the pro-slavery flag in front of your house, I'd rather you did it, because I want to know that you're an idiot and that I cannot waste any time trying to be friends with you.
But the thing is that don't you think that leads to a society where rules may change consistently? So, for example, today you might have X freedom, but then because it affects people, they curtail it.
No.
So-
Your
because
method
you've just
would do
mentioned-
that. Your method would do that, because
How?
if something new, let's say insulting,
Because
let's say
I believe in intellectual, rigorous discussion. Because I don't mind.
But what I'm saying is, so
But
you think.
insulting isn't a practical way of communicating.
But-
so, for
So
example,
where
but
would you,
if some- but if some-
where would you put the where would you stop the freedom?
So-
Am I asking
yeah,
that?
so-
'Cause your point is
yeah.
you want to put a restriction on
Yeah.
freedom, right?
So I don't-
what is your restriction
so
on freedom?
we
Where would you draw the line?
So in Islam, as a Muslim, we believe that all ideas are up for intellectual debate and discussion as long as there's evidence. So as long as there's evidence to back up a point, you are allowed to discuss those points until the cows come home.
Hence, when I listen to discussion up here, when the Muslims are speaking, they're always asking for the other person to produce the evidence. But if you're both Muslims, that's fine. But if you're talking to somebody who's a non-Muslim who can't produce that evidence, then it becomes a bit of a
It's true,
strange conversation.
but the point is that but the problem is that we're talking about.
Or they just walk away because the person hasn't got the evidence. But then, are you just going to speak to Muslims, or are you going to speak to other people?
I mean, that's the
Because
reason why I'm here, because I mean, this is proof of the pudding that we're actually sitting here and
But here's the
speaking
thing:
to you guys.
if another group within the society says we're not worried about you insulting our friend Muhammad beliefs, they don't want that speech to be illegal on their
But I
behalf.
don't
They're
think
not
that's
worried.
I just don't believe that's a productive way of engaging as human beings. As human beings, when we interact with each other, we don't. The default position is that we show each other respect.
Yeah, but you just said, like, okay, that's the statement you just made, but then I've listened to people just today where the Muslim guy was just like having a discussion, and as soon as the person didn't answer his question, he walked away. So how is that going to create cohesion between the two people?
So individuals,
Respecting people, caring for people, loving people. As soon as you don't agree with something, you just walk away.
it's true. So as an individual, like I said, so A, I can't answer for that person because I'm not that person. Two, obviously, practical
No, but you
implementation.
probably know it happens. You've been
Yeah,
up
of
here
course,
when
of course. So now, obviously, like I've said, as an individual implementation, there might be differences. People might not, might do certain things that you've mentioned, that they might just walk away. And some people, like myself, I'll sit and I'll listen. But the issue, what I'm talking about, is that let's talk about the default position in society. Not the exceptions, but the default position. So the default position in Western civilization is that we have the freedom of speech to say anything. My problem is that sensible people know how to live by that regulation, but not all people are sensible.
yeah. So you're saying you
So
want
actually,
to. You're saying you want to put a restriction. So I'm asking you, where would you put that restriction?
My restriction is that you're not allowed to insult people, you're not allowed to make lies about people, and any statement that you make, it doesn't have to be Islamic evidence, it just has to be evidence based on the reality. So say for example someone comes up to me and says that car is blue, I want that person, it doesn't have to be about Islam, it doesn't have to be about Christianity or Judaism or any other religion. If that person says to me that that car is blue, or that person proves to me as scientific fact, then the issue is that they have to provide me the evidence. And I can take on their argument and we can have an evidence-based discussion. But the point of the matter is that the red line for me is that Islam says that we're not allowed to slander, we're not allowed to offend, we have to speak with people with respect, and we have to be observant of people's beliefs. We can't force our opinion on them.
I think it puts such a restriction on society. I don't think it's worth. I get where you're coming from. I get why you want
But if you look at Islamic Spain, if you look at Andalus and Cordoba, and before the intellectual renaissance happened in the West, a lot of the Western civilization, the Greek culture, these things were translated in Islamic Spain, where we had this atmosphere of intellectual rigorous debate. Like for example, Greek philosophy. How did it make contact with Europe? It's because Arabic scholars translate Greek works into Arabic, and then the Arabic culture made contact with Europe. Socrates survived. So my point is that if we were about hiding views that disagree with us, then we wouldn't have Socrates and Aristotle and all of these Greek philosophers.
I'm with you on the
so
debate.
the Islamic civilization actually purports debate and discussion. It will put you on a platform to debate and discuss. But the important thing is that there has to be mutual respect, and it has to be based on respect and not slander. And like I mentioned, so this debate that I'm having with you is a key example. I trust you, you trust me that we're having a good discussion. But unfortunately, not everyone's like you.
Yeah, well, if I all of a sudden shockingly come out with something truly offensive, you can either try to replace what I've said with better ideas, or you can walk away. And
But don't I have the right? But shouldn't I have the right as a citizen? I should be protected because, like I said, what do you do with threats? Where do you put the line? What if someone threatens me?
Not threatening.
But that's just speech.
Yeah. Threat. I think we can agree that
I
there.
say, Ahmed, you know you. I'm gonna come and steal your phone. I haven't done anything.
Right.
I've just said something. Where do I put
But we're
the
not
line?
talking about threats. We're talking about just purely saying something.
But you're
that
saying
you find
that
offensive.
even if you threaten him like that, then you you want to go to the police. But I mean, they're going to be very busy. They've got murder, they've got rape, and now they're going to have you going to them and saying, well, you've just threatened someone, you can take their phone, and you want to take that to the police as well. They're going to be very busy.
Of course, but really, in Islam we have a completely different understanding. So in Islam, we want to build a civilization where crime rates are not high.
I agree.
We want to build a civilization where theft is not high, where theft is not the norm.
Wouldn't everybody like to live? I'd like to live in a world where nobody does anything wrong to me, but the fact is people do something wrong to me every day, my friend, on the basis you're talking about, calling me names, whatever. But the fact is the police are not going to do much about somebody just
It's
saying
not about the police. It's not
silly
about the police. It's about the idea. Does ultimate freedom of speech exist? That's my question. The key question that we all need to answer is can there ever be free speech?
I think there cannot, but I think that the modern way to try to achieve the best version of free speech possible is what I was saying before. To have it as liberal as possible in this scenario. So, in public, in the open marketplace of ideas, you have it as close to that ideal as possible, and then different restrictions when you're in school and things like that, where the collective endeavor is to achieve something more specific. But there is no right to not be offended. I can't predict what you're going to find offensive, right? I mean, obviously there's a couple of things, but beyond that, there's
insult is not. Like,
I may say something
you may say
that I just mean to let's say I'm trying to do some kind of thought experiment. And I just come up with a hypothetical, and I say, suppose blah 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 blah, and I'm just trying to use that as a tool to have a conversation, and it triggers something in you, and you go, whoa, wait a minute, I am really, really fundamentally offended by that. I can't predict that. There's no way to predict.
It's true, but Islam doesn't have anything against that. So as I mentioned, if someone has a theory based on evidence, there's not a problem. So you can say to me,
but I don't want to only have to say things that I have evidence for. No, please, thank you.
It's not even about evidence. So you may say something, but doesn't necessarily mean you have to be insulted in your approach. That's my issue. You don't have to start off a statement by saying, you know what, you know, the Prophet Muhammad or this person's a pedophile or this person is a devil and say
So the
stuff
thing
and
is,
say,
there's always going to be that. There's always going to be that dangerous in there. So you just got to get used to it, my friend.
You have to just have healthier ideas.
but that's not how society works. That's not the best way of getting building a healthy civilization. That may be good for individual discussion, but that's not a productive way to build a civilization.
So what
the
are you
best-
going to do? Go closing human arms and celebrate?
No, we have to educate people on what the red lines are when we discuss with each other. Isn't it? When you have a child and mother
Yeah, but you
relationship,
can't put your restrictions on other people, can you?
no, but what I'm saying is that there must be a common ground on what people can interact with. Isn't it? A child and a mother, they have a certain relationship. A brother and a brother have a certain relationship. That's based on education. It doesn't need to be restrictions, it just needs to be based on mutual understanding. But the issue is that people need to be educated on what those red lines are. So my point isn't what's the best way forward. My point of the matter is
But
that
everybody's red lines are going to be different.
that's the
gotta
reason
go.
why
Good talking.
no, that's why we need objective.
Exactly.
That's why we need objective red lines and not just subjective ones that are chosen by the government.